This week's surveillance report covers Microsoft Copilot's ongoing security failures, which feels like it's a weekly thing, but it gets crazier this week, which puts all of you at risk. The FTC has banned GM from selling driver location data. California is now banning data brokers from reselling health information. Iran's internet shutdown is reaching record lengths with some really interesting twists. The EFF has a guide to navigating age gates in our crazy times that we live in, and a lot more. It's a juicy week. Welcome to the Techlore Surveillance Report, your essential weekly tech news, delivering deep analysis on the latest threats to security, privacy, and just overall digital freedom, and empowering you to reclaim control and defend your rights. So this attack is called reprompt, and it actually impacts almost everybody who uses Copilot in a really sneaky way. Now, full disclosure, this has been patched, but this does not actually cover all the other issues with Copilot, which I'm about to cover as well. But first, I want to detail this attack so you all understand how sophisticated these AI attacks can get and why it's probably not the only one. So first, there are three techniques, and I'm going to cover all of them, so hopefully you guys can understand it. The first thing is called a parameter to prompt injection. What this does is this exploits the QURL parameter, which is used in reprompt to fill the prompt directly from a URL. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a second. Then it does a double request technique, where instead of enforcing the safeguards that Copilot normally has to prevent data leaks like this, these protections apply only to that initial request, but an attacker can bypass that by simply instructing Copilot to repeat each action twice, which is crazy. And the third thing is a chain request technique, which pretty much establishes a flow so that an attacker can continue taking more information while you don't know what's going on. So to quickly detail what the Q parameter is, and this is that first attack, which has to do with the URL. If you guys have ever seen this in URLs before, essentially you can add an question mark at the end of URL and then have equals and then start adding text. And so what this will do is, and they use this example on screen if you're watching, you can do copilot.microsoft.com/Q equals hello. And you might be wondering what that does. Well, it actually triggers the AI to process the prompt hello, exactly as if the user had manually entered it and clicked enter. This is important because apparently I haven't done this myself, but it seems like there are communities out there that will share Copilot prompts as these URLs so that people can just click a link and it'll automatically open Copilot for them and run the prompt for them. Sounds like a bad idea, of course, just on the surface without even getting deep into this story. But the double request method, what it does is it essentially uses executing prompts and what seems like to me almost like variables. And so they can use something like $name, which actually gives the current username to the user. The end result is what you see on screen if you guys are watching, and I'll describe it. So there's a Gmail link, and not a virus is the subject line, and you click the attacker's link, and then it essentially does this prompt automatically, and then it's going to essentially extract data and give it to the attacker. And the fact that this exploits three unique things about Copilot that can probably overall be solved, all three of them, means that this is a pretty concerning exploit, especially when you combine all of these things together. And actually, the researchers came together for some recommendations. And so for vendors like Microsoft, treat URL and external inputs as untrusted, and so apply stricter regulation on what Copilot can treat as trusted and assume. Also protect against prompt chaining, which means to ensure safeguards persist across repeated actions, follow-up requests, and regenerated outputs, not just the initial prompt. Because one of the things they leaned on in this attack was that, yeah, you were protected on the first one, but if they just ran the same command a second time, then you weren't protected anymore. And then it also has to design for insider level risk. So it's good to assume AI assistants operate with trusted context and access, so enforce least privilege, auditing, and anomaly detection accordingly, almost as if it was an employee, which is probably a good assumption to have here. Now, for Copilot personal users, this is the exact advice given by the researchers. Now, I'm going to add my own, which is maybe don't use Copilot until it's a bit more established, maybe, and I'll go into a few other stories here. But the first is to be cautious with links. Obviously, so only click on links from trusted sources, especially if they open AI tools or pre-fill prompts for you. Second, check for unusual behavior. If an AI tool suddenly asks for personal information or behaves unexpectedly, close the session and report it. And the third thing is to review pre-filled prompts. Before running any prompt that appears automatically, take a moment to read it and ensure it looks safe. So that is their advice. And now Ars did a little bit more coverage, and they actually confirmed that Microsoft has fixed this vulnerability in its Copilot AI assistant that allowed hackers to pluck a lot of sensitive user data from a single click on a legitimate URL. What's interesting is that Microsoft just last week, and we covered this last week, is that they don't consider every AI prompt injection attack a actual vulnerability or a threat, but this one clearly was one that they took seriously and they think is a serious issue. Now you might be thinking, Henry, oh my gosh, that's just one vulnerability. Except I would tell you, this is from the horse's mouth, as they say. Critics scoff after Microsoft themselves warn an AI feature can infect machines and steal their data. This is part of their experimental AI agent integrated into Windows, which they admit themselves can infect devices and steal sensitive user data, and has set off a familiar response from security-minded critics. Why is big tech so intent on pushing new features before their dangerous behaviors can be fully understood and contained? But don't worry. This is a direct quote. Microsoft recommended users enable Copilot actions only if you understand the security implications outlined. Now, this is in the context of the Copilot actions feature, which, yes, introduces even more risks than regular Copilot. But I really cannot underscore how Copilot does seem to have a new vulnerability on this podcast literally every week. And I think the most concerning part about all of this is actually their overall response to this kind of stuff, because all software has vulnerabilities. Even the most trusted software we talk about back here is going to have a vulnerability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unsafe or untrusted. I typically look for, when I look at software, the overall history. If they only have one vulnerability over the course of 5 years, that's not a terrible track record. And if they handle it really nicely and they did all the right stuff, it speaks to how it's a competent team that actually cares about protecting its users. Meanwhile, a Microsoft executive is still asking, why aren't more people impressed with AI? And this is the head of their AI department. He said, quote, geez, there are so many cynics. It cracks me up when I hear people call AI underwhelming. Well, bro, maybe they find it underwhelming because your AI tools are ... underwhelming. And to me, this is actually the biggest concern, because it speaks to a company that not only is being a bit reckless in the features they release, not really valuing user data, user security, and kind of just letting users maybe experience these tools and kind of say whatever and throw them into the Wild West. And then also turn around and say to people, no, this is exactly how we think things are going, and this is actually really good, and why aren't people more impressed? And kind of gaslighting all their users into thinking they should be liking this stuff, which I think there maybe is a place for some AI features to be well enjoyed, but I don't think anything Microsoft is doing seems to be well received by people. And maybe that's an issue of Microsoft and not of the people. That's all I have on that story. And now I'm going to talk about the FTC banning General Motors from selling driver location data. And later we'll talk about California banning data brokers from reselling health data. So 2 big wins this week, as well as some not so great things for story 3 and 4. So let's talk about the FTC, which bans GM from selling drivers' location data. So the U.S. Federal Trade Commission has finalized an order with General Motors and its subsidiary OnStar, settling charges that they collected and sold the location and driving data of millions of drivers without consent. And funny enough, they actually own GMC, Cadillac, Chevrolet, and Buick. For those who didn't know how far General Motors kind of goes beyond just themselves. You might be wondering what GM actually did. Well, they collected precise geolocation data and detailed driving behavior information from millions of vehicles, in parentheses, without customers' consent in the article, every 3 seconds. And it's not just through the car, it's actually through the OnStar's now discontinued Smart Driver feature, which was marketed as a driving habits self-assessment tool rather than a data collection mechanism. Not only was this collected without users' consent, it gets worse. The data was then sold to third parties, including consumer reporting agencies, which then provided it to insurance companies, leading to higher insurance rates or denial of coverage. Again, without customers' consent. So what do they have to do now? Well, now GM has to come forward. They have to allow consumers to request copies of their data and seek its deletion, provide vehicle owners the ability to disable precise geolocation data collection, and enable them to opt out of location and driving behavior data collection. In parentheses, with some limited exceptions. I have my own views on GM, but I'll just say if you are in the GM ecosystem, definitely take advantage of some of these tools that are accessible to you if you have a more modern vehicle from this company. company because there is still a lot you can do. And opting out of things does make a real difference. And even if they still collect it anyway, at least you have a recourse and say, hey, I disabled this, so why was this still collected? So there are many good reasons for you and anyone you know with a GM vehicle to take advantage of this and signal to them that people don't want these features. Keep in mind too, actually, Bleeping Computer kind of tags this at the very end of this article. 1 year ago in January 2025, the Texas Attorney General filed a lawsuit against car insurance firm Allstate for unlawfully collecting and selling driving data from over 45 million Americans. And this one is actually far worse in some ways because this tracking activity for that previous incident was carried out by adding an SDK developed by Allstate subsidiary Arity to popular apps like Life360, Gas Buddy, Fuel Rewards, and Rootly without driver's consent. What does that mean, Henry? Well, when developers make applications, a lot of times they don't just build it from scratch. They lean on things like third-party SDKs, and sometimes they optionally add their own analytics to help track user behavior in their apps. What they don't know is that some of these SDKs actually submit data to totally random big tech companies. Well, some developers do know that. It's a question for another time. But what this means is that if you were using an app like Life360, Gas Buddy, Fuel Rewards, it was actually contacting these SDKs and sending your personal data to this Allstate subsidiary. And if you think it was just those apps and you're safe because you drive a different vehicle, listen to this. That exact lawsuit I just talked about with the Allstate situation also involved several car makers, including Toyota, Lexus, Mazda, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Fiat, Maserati, and Ram, who also allegedly collected and sold data directly to Allstate and Arity. And so I would like to remind people that the car privacy space right now is pretty horrendous. The best you can do, and I'm showing this on screen as well, you can type in privacy for the letter, or the number 4, not the letter 4, cars, all one word, privacy for cars, and then just type that into your search engine. I'm showing this on Brave Search right now, and you just click it. And then what you can do, it's this weird kind of business side of things as well. But if you're an individual, you click individual on their website, and you can do a vehicle privacy report. Now, you can do a lot of this stuff manually and you can look into this and investigate things manually. But what this does is it's a privacy report. So you enter your vehicle's VIN number and then it tells you pretty much all the stuff that vehicle can collect about you. And sometimes it'll give you some actionable things you can do as well. Now, full disclosure, this is somewhat of a monetized website. And I do think they try to push people to use their own thing. But I still think it's a useful resource. And there really aren't any other great resources I can share with you all outside of this website. So check that out and I'll leave it in the show notes for you all. Okay, we have another win here. California has banned a data broker from reselling the health data of millions. And this is Cal Privacy. And they've taken action against the Data Masters marketing firm that sold the health and personal data of millions of users without being registered as a data broker. This one's actually pretty awesome, and it does involve what we talked about, I believe, last week, which is California's new laws that give you a little bit more ownership and allow you to opt out of data brokers in a more, I guess, public and free way through the government instead of having to go through private companies, which is a very cool thing that they're trying to do. So starting in 2026, essentially, again, consumers can access an online platform through DROP, D-R-O-P, and I talked about this more in last week's surveillance report, where you can submit a request to all registered data brokers to remove your personal information. Now, this company called Data Masters, which, yes, is just a data broker that I believe is based in Texas. Yes, they're based out of Texas. They have been blocked from selling personal information belonging to Californians. This company didn't just buy your email and buy your address and all the other shady things that the data broker industry does. They also bought and resold user information of millions of people suffering from various medical conditions like Alzheimer's, drug addiction, bladder incontinence, and many other things that were covered in a different article that weren't good and not things that should be relevant to any kind of sane business model. But yeah, they bought and resold lists of people based on age and perceived race, offering senior lists and Hispanic lists, as well as lists based on political views, grocery store purchases, banking activity, and health-related purchases. And of course, they still collected all the stuff you'd expect from these companies, like names, email addresses, physical addresses, and phone numbers. So it wasn't like that was in place of those other things. It was on top of. It's the cherry on top. Now, the really aggravating thing is that they actually came forward and they said, no, we don't do business in California. We don't manage data about Californians. We're not doing anything wrong. So why are you bothering us? Get out of here. Get out of my office. Turns out that they actually had to admit they were doing this when confronted with evidence alleging that it was manually screening the data. And actually, I don't think it's covered here in Bleeping Computers, but what I believe happened is they actually firmly went to them literally with spreadsheets from their own website going, these are all Californians on your website. So you're lying. And they said, yeah, okay, yeah, we're lying. So yeah, they are now at least temporarily kicked out of California. And I do encourage, if you are in California, to deal with this drop situation. I'll leave it linked as well in the show notes. Again, I believe I talked about it last week. If you missed it, you can rewatch last week's surveillance report as well. But drop gives you control over your data in California. And I really hope that it is a model for other states and other countries to do something similar to help reel in the data broker industry, which currently gives you almost no options to fight back except having to opt out of everything manually using something like the big ass data broker opt-out list, which I'll also leave in the show notes. But that is kind of one time and you have to do it on a frequent basis. And then we also have the automated ways to do it via things like easy opt-outs and things like Optory. For the best performing according to Consumer Reports, and of course, manual is also very well performing. Just keep in mind, manual is nowhere near as convenient. And I will say too, we still have yet to see how effective drop is. So I wouldn't recommend just only trusting drop completely. But if you're doing nothing right now, drop is only going to be an improvement. And actually, this is a perfect segue to the sponsor of this video, which is Easy Opt-outs. Yes, we got the one and only Easy Opt-outs as a sponsor of this video. Now, they are pretty much tied for the best data removal service out there, according to Consumer Reports' own independent research. The two top performing services were Optory and Easy Opt-outs. Now, you might be asking what the big differences are between them, and I would overall say it's the price. Easy Opt-outs comes in at $19.99 a year, and that is just a completely unbeatable price, and that is overall where we almost see the monthly prices for some of the other services out there. I've been using Easy Opt-outs for like 2 or 3 years now personally, and it's also the main service I recommend to all of my friends and family. They're just run by a couple guys. There's no third-party contractors, and they only collect the information that they absolutely need to opt you out of all the services out there collecting invasive stuff. Check out Easy Opt-outs down in the description, and I want to thank them for sponsoring this podcast. Now, back to the news. This next one, I'm going to be frank with you, I don't have a huge amount of commentary on, but this is an overall signal boost about internet outages, power outages, etc., as well as maybe kind of the broader reasons to care about digital rights and free access to information. And it's what's going on in Iran right now. So the Iran internet shutdown is one of the longest ever as the protests are continuing and things at the time of recording haven't really calmed down there very much. So last Thursday, Iran's leadership blocked internet and phone access across the whole country in response to massive anti-government protests and have prompted a brutal and deadly crackdown from authorities. And guys, this is really violent. At least 2,000 people have died as part of all the stuff going on right now. And this is still going on at least until the time of recording. And I just really wanted to highlight at least the technical aspect of what's going on here, which really speaks to why guys, free access to information is just so important. And I think we see it in situations like this. One of the first things that we see when governments really start to lose control of their citizens is they try to take control of the communication network. The way that we communicate and the way that we talk and the way that we're able to engage across a free internet really is how democracies can still exist. And so I think it's really important to look at this from two perspectives. The first perspective is, yes, for mission critical situations like this. They actually were even able to successfully block Starlink. And so this really is a genuine internet outage right now for people in Iran. And so I really want to encourage people to think about where technology lives in their life if something like this were to happen. I think this is where we get access to tools like Briar that work over Bluetooth and work completely offline and just building overall more resilient peer-to-peer technology that doesn't have to rely on any kind of centralized infrastructure that can be shut down. Seriously, I think Briar is something really cool. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's an Android-only application. Well, I think they also are on some desktop clients as well now, but it's mainly used on Android. There is no iOS client. But if you're on a plane and you don't get to sit next to the person you want to sit next to because you guys got different seats, you can still chat with someone the entire plane ride without having any internet because it just works over Bluetooth. It works just locally. And theoretically, there are ways to build different kinds of mesh networks. And I really think that the future of the web, based on how things are going, is going to be a little bit more decentralized and have to put a little more power in people's hands and not trust any kind of big tech as much. And this ties into my second point as well. I think, it's really easy to see how access to information and access to communication in these really vital situations and these extreme situations like what's happening in Iran is really obvious. But what does that mean in even your day-to-day life if you aren't in Iran and everything seems fine? I think it's really important to reflect on how little mundane things like how your messenger here doesn't let you talk to this messenger over there actually has a major influence on the people that you can and cannot communicate with. And I think when you start picking up on these patterns, you see the little things that big tech companies, governments, and just the overall web has moved in this kind of direction where you have a lot less freedom than maybe you did 5 years ago. I would argue we don't really have a fully open, decentralized web when anytime you try to access a post, it has to make you sign in and you need a registered account to get into it. Or if you use a VPN, you can't access a website. Or if you access through Tor, you get CAPTCHA'd or you can't access your bank account. Or if you try to access an app on a de-Googled operating system, it doesn't let you in. Or if you are using Signal and you try to contact someone on WhatsApp, it's impossible for them to contact you. By the way, on that last one, the EU is actually fighting hardcore for interoperability between messengers, and they are overall winning in that battle. So there are places in the world right now that are trying to open things up in some ways, but also the EU still wants to pass chat control. And so we have all of these crazy things happening in the world, but I just want this to be kind of a reminder of how technology plays into our lives, plays into communication channels, and the real power that this has and that it offers us, and how if we have a healthy internet, it's also a good sign that we have a healthy democracy and we have a system working for the people. And I just want people to really think about this when they see all these stories that I cover on this podcast, as well as when they see these kind of little things pop up in their day-to-day life, when they see companies do things that seem a little whack or seem like it's just a small thing in the wrong direction. When you actually look at the changes in the internet the last 5 years, those things seriously add up. And it really does start to feel like we're losing a big chunk of the internet that gives power to the people. So keep this in mind and try to support decentralized technologies when possible. And I say this as someone who uses a lot of centralized technology. But, if I'm using Signal all day, I still like to have alternative decentralized messengers for people already on those. And I like to just have those things ready to go. And I'm at least educated on them. And I can also recommend them to others. And I think that is actually still a really good step forward, even for all of you on an individual level, if you don't feel ready to fully migrate to completely decentralize everything, which is currently a pretty hard position to take right now. I'd say a lot of the tools aren't quite there on a usability front. But I hope you all enjoyed a little bit of this tangent. And I didn't have like a very definitive thing to really say here, but I wanted you all to have something to kind of think about during the stuff happening in Iran. But yes, let's definitely keep an eye on this and sending a lot of love over there to people who are impacted right now. All right, and before we get into the Defense Bulletin, there's a lot of updates this week in the Defense Bulletin, but I did have a quick little thing here from the EFF. And so the EFF did a little guide on you've hit an age gate, what now? So a bit of context, if you're new to the podcast or if you have been following the podcast, then you are well aware that there has been a huge push for age verification in the last several months all around the world. The EFF has been one of the biggest people fighting against this kind of stuff, and they've now put together this little guide, which pretty much talks about like what the different ways of verifying your information is and how old you are and how it works and what technology they use, what the privacy implications are of that, who has access to it, if they do audits, the visibility, pretty much everything. And they talk about the main services. So they cover here Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and Threads. They talk about Google, Gmail, and YouTube, YouTube, and they also talk about TikTok. So they kind of break down the main services out there and the different implementations that they have to try to verify your age and what the different kind of pros and cons are of each one. Now, it is really important to mention that this is risk mitigation, and they even say here, it should be clear by now that none of the age verification options are perfect in terms of protecting information, providing access to everyone, and safely handling sensitive data, which are the three core problems I have with age verification as well. But it says that's just one of the reasons that EFF is against age gating mandates and is working to stop and overturn them across the US and around the world. So I do just want to make it clear that when I'm also sharing this resource and when the EFF is sharing these resources, these aren't meant to be in place of fighting these things altogether. It's just that if you do find yourself in a situation where you do have to comply with this in any reasonable way, this is an excellent resource that I recommend all of you read and share with people you know so they're at least aware of the implications of having to upload private sensitive information to platforms who don't care about protecting their personal information, thanks to the government trying to control everything. It is not a good situation. And speaking to that Iran story, I think people should think about how age verification fits in the context of an Iran situation, which can happen in almost any country around the world. Democracies are fragile things. Okay, one other quick plug for the EFF is they did another wonderful article published today at the time of recording, and I'm going to leave it in the show notes, but it's called Congress Wants to Hand Your Parenting to Big Tech. And I'm just going to say here, this is the first sentence. Lawmakers in Washington are once again focusing on kids, screens, and mental health. But according to Congress, big tech is somehow both the problem and the solution. So Henry, why are you bringing this up? Well, I think everybody should read it, especially if you're an American, because when you actually listen to these arguments, it doesn't make any sense. Because yes, they say that these big tech platforms are the problem and they're causing all these issues and they're doing all these bad things, which I overall agree with. But then they also say, well, big tech is who we need to trust to find a solution, and we're going to trust them to figure out a way to do this, and we're going to have, blah, blah, blah. But really what needs to happen is we need to give parents more control and give children more control. And we need to reel in big tech companies as an overall concept. And the EFF does a really good job making its points and making it quite clear why what they're actually going after doesn't really protect children. But again, don't just trust my summary. I actually recommend you guys read this. The last sentence is parents don't need big tech to replace them. They need laws that respect how families actually work. And I think that's beautifully stated. Okay, and now we get into the defense bulletin, and we're going to start with the threats and data breaches. And we're going to start with a never-before-seen Linux malware, which is far more advanced than typical. So there's a framework that exists out there called Void Linux, which by its source code features more than 30 modules that can be used to customize capabilities to meet attackers' needs for each infected machine. It can provide additional stealth and specific tools for reconnaissance, privilege escalation, and lateral movement inside a compromised network. If you're on screen, you'll see some of the capabilities of this, but overall, it just seems like a really sophisticated framework that's designed to infect Linux machines. And it does say at the bottom here, there's no indication that Void Linux is actively targeting machines, so there's no immediate action required by defenders, but this is something I want to put on everybody's radar. And I want to remind people that yes, while Linux is very privacy respecting out of the box and doesn't have any of the issues that big tech comes with, and it gives you all this user freedom and a lot of cool benefits, keep in mind it is not just a foolproof tool that instantly makes you secure and all these different things. You still have to treat it carefully. And I always like to share these Linux stories as a good reminder to people. Not to avoid Linux, just to keep in mind it's not this perfect tool either. So this one is, another bad thing for Telegram. It's like Telegram mostly has negative news come through this podcast, but there is a hidden Telegram proxy link that can reveal your IP address in one click. Essentially, this is actually it's not the same thing at all, but it's a similar execution in how you get people to fall for it, which is a link that looks legit and even follows the same formatting as a regular link as the Copilot thing I talked about in this episode. But yeah, pretty much if you get sent a t.me/proxy server link. What happens here, and there's a video on screen if you're watching, is you click the link and it checks the proxy, and then it pretty much has all these connection, details in the terminal. What this does is it exposes the IP address to the person on the other side, and it just sends this handle. So it looks very innocent. It doesn't really look like anything's going on. To me, it just looks like you're tagging someone on Telegram, but what it's actually doing is stealing your IP address. And of course, Telegram is downplaying the issue because they don't have a history of treating privacy and security very seriously. And I have no issue saying that on this podcast, as it is overall a very truthful thing to state over the years. In the meantime, it's advised to be cautious with Telegram usernames and links that resolve to t.me domains, as clicking disguised proxy links could unintentionally reveal your IP address. And if you don't want to deal with this whatsoever, you can bypass this issue by just using a system-wide VPN, but not everyone's going to want to do that constantly. So just something to put in your guys' radar. All right, this next one impacts Facebook, and it's a phishing attack for Facebook users. This utilizes fake account notifications. And so just in general, if you receive anything regarding Facebook links, just go open and log into your actual Facebook account and check for notifications there. That's the best way to protect against this. And if you want to learn more, as always, check out the show notes. There's a max severity nightmare flaw, which impacts nearly 60,000. So this is something about me. I never know how to pronounce things. I'm actually surprised I got nightmare that time, which is spelled N-I-8. M-A-R-E, but this next one is N-8-N. Nate-N? Like Nathan? Nightmare? I don't know. I'm pretty bad at like picking up and recognizing when you add numbers to letters. It just doesn't click with my brain for some reason. But anyway, if you use N8N instances, please look into this because there is a critical vulnerability that you need to patch right away. And that I can tell you. Similarly, if you run anything with WordPress and you have the modular DS plugin, there is a flaw in that plugin as well, which can hand over admin access to somebody else. So definitely check out the show notes if you use that plugin. This one's more of just a heads up that there is a high-profile Gmail and WhatsApp attack campaign going on around the Middle East, and it has to do with suspicious links. The article covers a lot more of what this looks like, but yes, it just uses a phishing URL that's disguised behind a dynamic DNS provider. And so check out the show notes, especially if you're in the Middle East or if you're concerned about this attack specifically on WhatsApp and Gmail. Okay, this one was quite interesting. Essentially, there were flaws in how 17 models of headphones and speakers use Google's one-tap fast pair Bluetooth protocol, which have left devices open to eavesdroppers and stalkers. It's quite an interesting attack, and so if you use any kind of Bluetooth headphones, especially in the context of an Android device, you should go ahead and check this one out. All right, and now some data breaches. So the Central Maine healthcare breach exposed data of over 145,000 people, and I did want to give props to them because they did notify affected individuals almost immediately and continue to do so as the investigation advanced and revealed new impacted individuals. So it sounds like they actually are taking this quite seriously. So I just wanted to give props on their handling of that. A Belgian hospital, AZ Monica, shuts down servers after a cyber attack. And we are sadly seeing a huge uptick in the last several years of healthcare-related attacks, especially when it comes to hospitals. So just keep this in mind and keep in mind the infrastructure-related side of data breaches. Back to health-related attacks, the University of Hawaii Cancer Center was hit by a ransomware attack. Why does someone attack a cancer center? Like, how crappy is that? This happened apparently on August 31st, and it affected a single research project at the UH Cancer Center without impacting clinical operations or patient care. So yeah, it's just overall pretty crappy stuff, but they did say that they worked with experts to obtain a decryption tool and secure destruction of the information that the threat actors illegally obtained. So that is quite interesting, and sadly, they still haven't notified people, so I do hope they get on that. All right, this next one has to do with the Betterment, which is the fintech company, which is probably what some people might use for their 401ks. But they did confirm that hackers broke into some of its systems last week and accessed the personal information of an undisclosed number of its customers. I will say I'm pretty disappointed in Betterment's approach to this. They haven't really revealed how many people were impacted. I don't think they've even gone forward and notified the impacted individuals. They just put out some vague statements about not engaging with any suspicious people. And then the representatives of Betterment did not immediately respond to a request asking for more details about the attack. That's from TechCrunch. And Betterment security incident webpage contains a hidden no index tag. What that means is it tells search engines to ignore the page, making it more difficult for anyone searching the web to discover information about the data breach. So, luckily, TechCrunch and other media outlets are still covering it as well as us because it sounds like Betterment doesn't want you to know that this impacted them, but it is a serious issue that people should be aware of. There's a Spanish energy company called Endesa, which has disclosed a data breach affecting its customers, and it doesn't seem like there is a cited number, but if you're a customer of them, definitely look in the show notes to see what next steps are. Next one is Monroe University, who says a 2024 data breach has impacted 320,000 people. So if you are in any way involved with Monroe, check this out. The Victorian Department of Education says that hackers stole students' data, and this is in Australia, that's Victoria. They've notified parents that attackers accessed the database, which contained the personal information and email address of current and former students, prompting password resets. They did not share how many people were impacted by the breach. So this is something to look into if you live in Victoria, and especially if you have students in Victoria. Again, everything's in the show notes in the description. The South Korean giant, apologies in advance, KYOWON, and if you want to laugh at me getting this wrong, Kyoan. And if you know how to say that, please leave me the phonetic way to say it in the description. But they have confirmed data theft in a ransomware attack. And so if you are in any way involved with this company, it's good to look into that. It sounds like the cited number is around 5.5 million people who could have had their information exposed to hackers. So this is not a joke. Oh man, Grubhub has confirmed a data breach. They pretty much don't really know anything. And when I say they don't know anything, it means they're still investigating and we don't really know what's going on yet. And so, yeah, apparently last month, there was a wave of scam emails sent from its own b.grubhub.com subdomain that promoted a cryptocurrency scam. And so it's unclear even if that was connected to this incident. So this is still unfolding. So stay subscribed to learn more as we learn more. Okay, I promise I'm going to try to get through these updates as quickly as possible. I'm also running a little bit late here, but Apple has confirmed that Google Gemini will power Siri and says privacy remains a priority. I'm not going to get too far into this. I actually covered it in our digital rights newsletter, which I'll also leave in the show notes as well if you guys want to read my thoughts on that. But pretty much, we don't know what this looks like yet. Essentially, Apple seems to want to lean into their private compute technology that they already set up for Apple Intelligence. And so theoretically, if all goes well, you'll get kind of the quality of Gemini in a slightly more privacy-respecting way than typical. And I think I actually mispronounced it. It's called private cloud compute is the AI technology. But there's two ways of looking at this. And there's the optimistic way I just shared with you, which is kind of like, yeah, this will be slightly more private Gemini. And there's the more pessimistic view, which is, are we really going to trust two big tech companies to be able to figure this out and over the long run provide real value to users in a ethical way? I'll let you guys decide where you land on that one. And then I did also want to share how OpenAI is going to test ads in ChatGPT, which I've already talked about on this podcast the last several weeks. But now it seems like it is FRFR. This is for real, guys. And it's ads coming to the free tier and a new $8 a month ChatGPT Go plan in the US. I'm going to say it right now. I think for a lot of different reasons, it's probably a good idea to avoid ChatGPT from an ethics perspective, privacy perspective, digital freedom perspective, etc. But I think if you do use ChatGPT, I'm going to be real with you. I hate when I have to pay for something and there are still ads. So I would almost encourage you all either use the free tier with some kind of ad blocker if that's possible at all with this, or just pay the full $20. Don't do the $8 a month. You're giving them money and still getting ads. Like that's whack, man. And it really makes me mad how that's kind of the direction a lot of streaming services are moving in. And so for me, if I'm paying for something, I expect no ads. That's just kind of the default behavior for me. Now, maybe I'm injecting a bit of personal thoughts on that, but I did want to share this update because I've been talking about it on the podcast. Now, more of the typical updates you guys can expect. Tor browser hit version 15.0.4, which seems to mostly just have security fixes and a few bug fixes. Tails OS, the anonymous-oriented operating system, hit version 7.4. It comes with new persistent language and formats. They fixed some problems, and yeah, it seems like a pretty good update. So if you use Tails, make sure to get yourself up to date. Linux Mint 22.3 is called Xena, which launches with Cinnamon 6.6, an overhauled menu, and smarter scaling. So if you use Linux Mint, make sure to get updated and enjoy the newest and greatest version yet. All right, Wine, which is totally not an emulator. It literally stands for Wine is not an emulator. But they've released version 11, which has full WOW64 support, NT-Sync for Linux, and graphics updates. So yeah, great stuff all around. Joplin is a privacy-focused open source note-taking app, and they hit version 3.5, which refines markdown editing, adds case-insensitive tags, and boosts syncing and sharing. So if you're a Joplin user, check that out. Proton Lumo, their private-oriented AI, is introducing projects as a way to organize and create. This actually seems pretty well done, and it looks like this feature, I haven't yet tested it yet, but it looks like it genuinely integrates with Proton Drive. So you can actually upload something from Proton Drive, and it's going to have it linked inside of that project, and then you can have multiple chats as part of that project for context. This next one is more of a plug. I saw it originally from Meredith Whitaker, who's the president of Signal on Mastodon, but pretty much she called out this GitHub repo that tries to remove all the AI agents in the Windows operating system. And it's an open source thing. I'll leave it linked in the show notes, but essentially it should allow you to disable a ton of Copilot stuff all in an open source fashion. And it looks like it's actually fairly easy to do. Debian 13.3, the Linux distro, hit Trixie, which was released, and it has security updates and bug fixes. So check that out if you're on Debian. If you are watching this video on NewPipe, hello, very meta of all of us, but they hit version 0.28.1, which improves playback, metadata, and SoundCloud support. So if you want to watch this video with better playback improvements, you should be updating to the newest version of NewPipe. And heads up, we do post all of our content on Techlore.tv, which is our PeerTube server, so you can actually watch us from NewPipe on PeerTube if you want the most free and decentralized way to engage with our content. Linux has hit an all-time high for Steam market share in December, which is very exciting. So now it is up to 3.58%, which is a 0.38% increase over November. So I'm hoping that more and more of you out there are moving from Windows to something like Linux. This was a plug for, I guess, myself. I made a blog in my RSS feed, which is crazy, but it's called Techlore Interviews Andrei Meshkov, who breaks down Apple's new system-wide filtering API. So, of course, this is in the show notes, and if you're subscribed on YouTube, you might have already seen this video, and I'll leave the video itself linked in the show notes as well. But yes, in person, I was in Cyprus, and I interviewed Andrei and asked about Apple's new filtering API, which many of you should get access to fairly soon, and not just AdGuard, but almost any other third party will be able to hook into this and give you a lot more robust filtering on a local level for your iOS devices. And that is local, which means that theoretically, you can just do some really robust filtering across your apps without needing to change your DNS necessarily. It's just a local filtering that apps have access to. It's pretty awesome stuff. Check that out if you want to learn more in the show notes. And also, I already did a full-length Techlore Talks interview with Andrei that isn't released yet, but it will be coming out in the next few weeks. And so if you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, obviously subscribe there. But if you're listening in the audio form, you should search up Techlore Talks, and I'll leave a link to Techlore Talks as well in the show notes so that you all, if you're listening to Surveillance Report, can also follow Techlore Talks, where I bring on experts to talk about things for you guys to deep dive into different stuff. So check that out as well. All right, Thunderbird hit version 147, and it's the open source email client, and it has a new folder path option and localization preferences were added. Firefox 147 brings Apple Silicon Web GPU support, improved video playback and picture-in-picture, and more. And so if you want to get the newest and greatest Firefox, make sure to update your Firefox or your Firefox fork whenever your fork also gets this update. I've actually never heard of this before, but I did see it, and it looks like it's open source, but there's a project called Open Project version 17.0, which brings real-time document collaboration, improved meetings, and much more. So if you use this service, check out that update. Nextcloud also got an update. It looks like it's a fairly minor update, but make sure to still update it for the newest security patches. Okay, I actually don't know if many people use this, but I can highly recommend this service. It's how I organize all of my meetings behind the scenes on Techlore. It's open source and it's called cal.com, and it's a really good alternative to those other services that many people use to do, booking and scheduling. So you send someone a link and then they have to schedule a time on your calendar. Cal.com is the open source competitor to that, and they've never had companion apps yet for either iOS or Android, but now they do. They actually have an iOS service in beta on test flight, and I downloaded it earlier today, and it's fine. It's a beta. It has a few bugs here and there, so it's not fully polished, but I'm pretty impressed so far, and I was actually, funny enough, just yesterday searching to see if they had any kind of companion apps, and I saw they didn't, and then this came out literally today. So it was pretty exciting. And that, my friends, concludes this week's Techlore Surveillance Report. I want to thank you all for getting to the end and sticking with me on a bit of a longer week is what it seems like. If this analysis helped you reclaim control, you can become a Techlorian by visiting the links in the show notes to help us stay independent and also gain access to exclusive communities and key perks to help keep us growing and keep us free to the world. Please, if you can, also take a moment to leave a rating and share this episode to spread digital freedom to everyone around the world. That stuff really does help, and it's good engagement for our podcast. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time on the next episode of Surveillance Report.